Can everybody hear me okay? Are we good? Excellent, great. Megan, would you like to go ahead and get started?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending SCLA's first sponsored webinar titled Other Duties as Assigned, Navigating Non-Traditional Library Roles. The mission of the Continuing Education Committee is to provide professional development opportunities to all South Carolina librarians. Our goal is to host a webinar at 2 p.m. on the last Thursday of each month. We are currently scheduling webinars for June and July. We will be opening a webinar proposal form on the SCLA website soon so that you can submit ideas.
And
we have three presenters today. I am Megan Palmer, and I'm the assessment librarian at the University of South Carolina. Jade Geary is the instructional design librarian, and she is also at the University of South Carolina. Our last presenter is Caroline Smith. She is the Inclusive Services Consultant at the South Carolina State Library. We will each present about our non-traditional library roles and discuss how we've navigated within those roles. Feel free to ask questions in the chat box while we're presenting. Our moderator, Tiffany Hayes, will compile the questions and the presenters will address them at the end of the session. A recording of the session and presenter slides will be emailed to registered users. The video will also be uploaded to SCLA's YouTube channel.
all right, and let me just move the presenter over here to Megan. And it's all yours. While she's doing that, for anyone who's anyone who has trouble with audio, there's an option at the top if you lose your audio.
Tiffany, are you able to see my screen?
I am. I see
Okay.
your main screen with your title there.
Okay. As I said earlier, my name is Megan Palmer, and I'm the assessment librarian at the University of South Carolina. Today, I will be giving you a brief history of my position, discuss my background, give you an overview of what I do as an assessment librarian, and discuss how I've navigated in my non-traditional library role. Here's some information about my institution. We have 6 library locations on campus. My position works across all units. We have over 30,000 enrolled students. We have 56 librarians and 93 staff positions, and our library budget is at approximately $20 million. I'm going to give you a brief background of how my position was created. Academic libraries have collected basic statistics regarding their collections for a long time. However, there was a big push in the late 1990s for accountability and having a process of assessment. The Association of Research Libraries introduced the New Measures Initiatives in 1999, which was a collection of projects designed to address issues of service quality, electronic usage and value, and outcomes assessment. In the next year, the ARL Board of Directors endorsed new ARL development priorities, such as helping member libraries look at assessing library performance. ARL and Texas A&M University developed the LibQual survey instrument. With this big push of accountability and assessment, a library survey team was created in 2003 to coordinate user survey activities. The LibQual survey was ran yearly from 2003 to 2006. The Assessment Information Management Team was formed in 2007 to coordinate library-wide assessment activities and prepare for SACS accreditation in 2011. SACS stands for Southern Association of colleges and schools and is one of 6 regional accreditation organizations. Schools, colleges, and universities go through accreditation to show that their credits and degrees meet certain standards. SLIS programs in the United States also go through an accreditation process through the American Library Association. 2 recommendations that came out of the survey team were bringing in a consultant and sending a librarian for professional development. The first recommendation was that the library bring in the Effective, Sustainable, and Practical Library Assessment Group. This service involved a site visit, a report with recommendations on practical and sustainable assessment, and a follow-up assistance with implementing the recommendations. The group also recommended that the library send the lead person for library assessment activities out for training to the 2008 Service Quality Evaluation Academy, which was an intensive 5-day program that focused on both qualitative and quantitative methods for collecting and analyzing library service quality data. The program emphasized basic concepts and skills in measurement and data analysis that will be applicable to service quality evaluations. Steve Hiller and Jim Self were the consultants for the Effective, Sustainable, and Practical Library Assessment Group. They recommended that the survey team be disbanded and its responsibilities become part of the recently formed Assessment Information Management team. They also recommended that effective and sustainable assessment cannot succeed without someone who has a designated portion of time devoted to assessment. Ideally, this would be the AIM team leader who would serve as the de facto assessment coordinator. While committees can provide some level of support for ongoing work or accomplish specific projects, committees cannot sustain programs. They believe that the development of a sustainable assessment program with an effective coordinator requires at least an initial quarter-time commitment. The chair of the AIM team then became the assessment coordinator. She was originally in the reference department and split her time between reference and assessment activities. As the consultants pointed out, this assessment coordinator would not necessarily conduct all assessment activities, but would serve as the assessment spokesperson and leader. An assessment coordinator can help in moving efforts forward, integrating data into the decision-making stream, and provide both guidance and support to assessment practitioners. This person would coordinate efforts, serve as a resource person, know best practices, promote understanding of the value of assessment to the organization, chair the AIM team, and help establish a culture of assessment. Eventually, this position turned into the full-time position of assessment librarian. Now that we know the history and creation of my position, I'm going to discuss some of my background. I graduated from Penn State University with a bachelor's in psychology and graduated from the University of Pittsburgh with a master's in library and information science. At that time, they did not offer any sort of course on library assessment, but I knew that assessment was a very important field within libraries. I started working as a reference and instruction librarian at Coker College in January 2011. I was involved in assessment activities such as evaluating information literacy and user experience. I served on the college-wide assessment committee and worked on a SACS accreditation. In fall of 2013, I started as a part-time reference librarian at Thomas Cooper Library. I was then hired in my current position in the spring of 2014. Since I did not have an extensive background in assessment, I was hired with the expectation that I would be supported with any training that I needed, which is really important to navigating a non-traditional role, and I will discuss that further in my presentation. I wanted to show you what my position description looks like. The majority of my time is spent working on various library assessments and responding to statistical requests. So what does an assessment librarian do? Here's a brief overview of some of the things that I do, and I will go into more details in the next slides. I participate in many teams for my library. I chair the assessment team. I briefly spoke about this team earlier. We expanded the membership to include all areas of the library and shortened the team name to just assessment team. So right now we have someone from collection development, systems, interlibrary loan, special collections, research and instruction, and the music library. The expanded membership has helped with adding different ideas and perspectives to the team. Their main role is to advise and assist with assessment initiatives. I'm also on the strategic planning team. My role has been on creating and measuring goals and objectives and communicating the information to stakeholders. I have implemented the use of a balanced scorecard, which I will talk more about later. I'm also on the spaces planning team. Our initial charge was on a redesign of the main floor of Thomas Cooper Library, but we've expanded our scope to the whole building. I look at ways we can assess space and user needs. The Library Services Council meets monthly and every department is represented. It's a nice way to know what's going on in various units. I served in the ILS Review Task Force, and we put together a report on how we currently use our ILS, what we need a new ILS to do, and what we would like for a new ILS to do. This document was prepared for our dean about 3 years ago when Pascal announced having a statewide ILS. Last year, my associate dean, Becky Geddes, and I formed a University Library Student Advisory Council. This group was set up to be a formal channel of communication between students and library administration. It's also a great way to hear direct feedback and suggestions. I fill out annual statistical reports and reports as needed. I listed the reports in order of when I have to fill them out during the fiscal year. Each year I make sure that I'm pulling numbers the same way to be consistent, but I do need to read the instructions each year because they do make changes. The Blueprint for Academic Excellence is a strategic planning document that each academic unit has to complete for the Provost Office at the University of South Carolina. This document is due in March, so I work closely with my administration on pulling numbers needed to complete it. And I also receive reports upon request, but the ones listed are the main ones that I work on each year. And then here are some of the assessment activities that I do, and I'll go into more detail in the next slides. A balanced scorecard is a strategic management tool that measures the library's performance as it moves towards its vision. I chose this tool for our strategic plan because I felt it would increase accountability and improve communication throughout the library. I placed it on the library's intranet because many departments wanted to keep this as an internal assessment tool. Summa is an open source, mobile, web-based assessment toolkit for collecting and analyzing observational data about the usage of physical spaces and services, and was developed by North Carolina State University. We use it to count how many people are in the building, where they are in the building, and make general observations on what they are doing. We also use it for smaller observations. For example, we are interested in having a secured front entrance, so I use Summa to count how many people are walking into the building between classes to assess how many entrance points we would need if this project moves forward. In my time as an assessment librarian, I have done a lot of surveys. So prior to me becoming the assessment librarian, the LibQual surveys were ran from 2003 to 2006. And due to the declining response rate, it was decided that surveys should run on a rotating basis. The assessment team locally developed a faculty survey in 2012. And when I started my position, I started it in 2014. So in 2016, we ran the Ithaca faculty survey. And then the following year, in spring 2017, we ran a student survey that was based off of one that was run by the University of Chicago. And we were really happy with our response rate for that survey. Last fall, we created a homegrown faculty survey. And the assessment team and I, we determined what we wanted to know from the faculty, and we used that to create a very concise, informative survey tool. Our annual surveys run on a 3-year basis. Since we sent out a faculty survey this past fall, we are preparing to send out a student survey this upcoming academic year. I also send out a lot of internal surveys. My dean appreciates feedback and questions, so when we have our library faculty meetings or when the dean is holding his quarterly briefing sessions, I send out a form for library employees to fill out with things they want addressed during the meeting. We also ask library employees their opinions about internal communication, library spaces, and the staff lounge. We've also used our survey tool to create voting for games associated with annual staff appreciation luncheon and holiday party. And then the departments within my institution also send out user satisfaction surveys. I am mindful of survey fatigue, and I don't want to overwhelm our users with surveys, so we do run these on a schedule. Another big project that I worked on was creating a data warehouse, a place to house all of our statistics that is easily accessible. I decided to put it on a LibGuide because I felt it was the best place to store it at this time. What I like about it being on a LibGuide is that files cannot be deleted or altered unless someone has editing rights. And it also gives me control and flexibility on how to store files. Another job duty of mine is to provide guidance to library employees for assessment projects. I've had librarians interested in creating surveys. I either help to compose their surveys or edit them. I walk them through the IRB process, and I help them analyze their results. If librarians are interested in surveying our library users, they do need to come to me first so that I can get administration approval. I was not trained to be an assessment librarian prior to accepting the position as one. I did have an interest in assessment, and I feel like I worked towards developing my skills prior to applying for this position, but I do believe that all librarians will have to do some sort of assessment activity within their library systems. We are in the age of accountability, so it does take the whole library to demonstrate impact and value. My role is much broader, and I like to think of myself as weaving all of these pieces together into a narrative to show value and impact. So to me, effective communication is a must-have skill in this role. I work with all units across my library system, so I have to be clear about what I need and when I need it. You also have to close the assessment loop, so I have to communicate what I've learned to participants and stakeholders. I also believe that continuing education is vital to non-traditional roles. I am in a department of one, and there's no one else that does my job in my institution. One of the best ways that I've learned new skill sets has been from attending conferences and workshops. Networking is equally important. Learning from others and discovering what they're doing at their institutions brings fresh ideas and new tools. I also watch a lot of webinars. I look for anything that relates to assessment. And lastly, I keep up with current books and articles as well. In non-traditional roles, you have to keep up with current trends. Thank you for listening to this overview of my position and how I have navigated this role. I love to talk about assessment and would love to answer any further questions that you may have. So please feel free to contact me at any time. And up next is Jade Geary.
Okay. Also, remember, if you have any questions for the presenters, please type them in chat. And if you're calling in on a phone, please mute your phone so we don't get your background noise. Thank you. All right. Go ahead with next presenter. Do you want me to, do we need to change? Yeah. All right. And go ahead and share your screen whenever you're ready, if you have a PowerPoint.
Perfect. Working on it now.
We're seeing it. Whoop.
Oh, yay. Okay.
Almost. It went away.
All right. How's that?
I am not seeing a screen at the moment.
Oh, no.
It was there and then it left.
All right. It has that I'm sharing, but can you all see it?
I'm not seeing your screen. I'm seeing that it's waiting to view your screen.
Okay, let's just try it this way. My whole entire screen.
If you're using double monitors, make sure you've got the right monitor highlighted?
Just the one. Sorry, y'all. Got me sharing it on my end.
Jade, go ahead and don't do anything else. Go ahead and do the slideshow, because I see it when you do the slideshow. Like, don't go back to the GoToMeeting. Just go ahead and
see it now.
I see it. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Sorry about that. Always fun using new technology, right? And so that is a big fun part of my job, actually. So let's get into it. My name is Jade Geary. I am the Instructional Design Librarian at Thomas Cooper Library. So yes, I work with Megan that was speaking earlier. I also am pursuing my Doctorate of Education in Curriculum and Instruction with an educational technology focus.
Can I interrupt just a second? We do have people who are still not seeing your screen. I'm not sure what's going on here.
Not sure what to do if some people can see it and some people can't.
That is very strange, because I am also not seeing it. We have a few people who cannot and some who can. That's really strange. I've never run into this before.
There's not a way to upload the slides into GoToMeeting, is there?
If you want, you can email it to me and I will share it from my screen. That was working earlier, so that might be the easiest way.
Okay. 2 seconds. Sorry if you're getting a preview of my email now. I don't want to stop sharing, but I don't want to mess it up. Let's see. All right, it's on the way to you.
All right, let's see. It's opening. It's a little slow, but we'll get it here in a second.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We're working on it. Come on. How's that? Is everybody seeing?
I do.
All right. Those who previously were not seeing it, so far so good. All right.
Great.
You want me to click the next?
Yes.
There is occasionally some delay in clicking through to the next one from someone else. So if I have a minute's delay, or a couple seconds. Okay, go right ahead. I'll mute myself.
Awesome. So I'm Jade Geary. I'm the Instructional Design Librarian at Thomas Cooper Library. So I work with Megan Palmer that was speaking earlier. I am also a Doctor of Education student. My focus is in curriculum and instruction with an educational technology focus. And I'm also an ALA emerging leader this year. And feel free to contact me on Twitter. I also have my email on the last page. It's bjade90 on Twitter. I don't think you can see it on the screen right now. So my next slide is what is instructional design, or ID for short. And I'd just like to hear from you all if you've ever heard the term instructional design. What does it mean to you? Do you know anything about it? It's okay if you don't. It's still a pretty new area in librarianship, but I'd love to hear in the chat box, or I guess see in the chat box, any ideas about what instructional design is. Universal design is definitely a great component of instructional design. If you're not familiar with universal design, I like to call it designing for everyone in mind. So just making materials the most accessible for anyone that can be viewing them. Course design, designing instruction, yes. So it's all a big part of it. So anytime anyone asks what instructional design is, I like to give them the definition. If you can go 2 slides forward, that would be great. I like to give them the definition that is on the screen now. So instructional design is the process of creating instructional material in a way that delivers the material in the most effective and efficient way possible. So if you've ever been in a class when you're working on your undergraduate degree and the professor just droned on traditional lecture style, and maybe it just wasn't really your speed. So that would be a time where instructional design could kind of step in to make sure that you are getting the material that you need to succeed in the course. So a big part of it is that creation of instructional materials, but instructional design goes way beyond simply creating the materials that you may have to access. You also have to consider some how students learn, what the learning outcomes are for the course or whatever learning scenario that you have, and what materials and methods you can use to effectively get that information to students or other individuals that you're working with so that you all can meet your goals, whether they're academic or how to use a computer, whatever it is. So if you'll go ahead and hit the next slide. Why is instructional design important to libraries? So it's definitely a new up and coming trend in library land. When I first started, like when I went to library school, instructional design wasn't something that was really covered. And then after I graduated from library school, I became an instructional developer, and they were starting to make instructional design librarians. There were a few in the United States, but not a ton. But why is it important? If you'll go ahead and hit the next slide. It's because libraries spend a lot of time instructing patrons. So it's really simple. No matter the type of library that you're in, chances are you're giving some kind of instruction. If you're in a public library, you might be teaching computer classes or helping someone understand how to better use Excel or Microsoft Word, or even just how to turn a computer on. You may be in an academic library where you're having to teach workshops on citation managers and how they're going to be beneficial when you're writing a dissertation or a thesis. You may be asked to speak with a class about how to find research materials for an assignment students are working on. Maybe you're a school librarian and you teach a lot of students how to use MLA or some other citation style. So no matter the library, I'm confident that instruction is happening there. And I'd love to see if you want to share in the comments what type of instruction occurs at your library. I think it's really important to have some of those cross-library conversations about what people are doing. So you might be wondering what I do. If you'll go ahead and hit the next, you need to go the next 2 slides. A big part of what I do is I design credit-bearing courses. USC has a course called Information Literacy, or Library 101, and focus is Information Literacy, sorry. So I help design courses for that, keeping the material up to date. I also design digital learning objects for students at a distance who may never step foot into the library. Also, students who are in Columbia but just don't come to the library, we want people to be able to access information whatever way they're comfortable. So this can be things like tutorials on how to get to our databases or download an article from our databases. Or it can be something like how to request an item through interlibrary loan. Maybe it's something a little bit more engaging where the students can actually go through the process of requesting an item through interlibrary loan. But this is a really new venture for our library. This is the first instructional design position that Thomas Cooper has had. And so it's also really important for me to work with other librarians in the building to create instructional content and to see what their needs are, and how we can take the library further, not only for students, even though that's mainly my focus, but how I can help other people in the building. So now that you know a little bit about what I do, I want to share how you can navigate a non-traditional role yourself. And if you can just go and hit the next ones next to you. Yep. So if you find yourself in a non-traditional role or considering a non-traditional role, one of my biggest tips would be to find people that have similar roles. And that can sound a little daunting if you don't know anyone that has a similar role. But I encourage you to dig a little bit deeper. Even if, say, you're the instructional design librarian and you don't know any other instructional design librarians, you can look for people that are doing instructional design. It may not be exactly what you do because it's not in a library, but they're going to be great people who understand a big component of your job that you can share ideas with, and it's going to be really beneficial. You can learn a lot from those people. See what other people are doing in similar roles. Big thing that I like to do is kind of creep on other libraries' websites, YouTube pages, social media, and see what kind of content they're making for their students, what they're sharing, what's getting a reaction. Also, if I see something in a class that I'm enrolled in and it's a video that we don't have, they had to get that resource from somewhere else, that's something I like to make too. I also think it's really important if you're in a non-traditional role, to keep track of your time, your projects, and expectations that others might have. Have conversations with your coworkers, with your boss, depending on your setting, maybe it's your deans, and see what expectations they have for your position. If it's a new position, they probably had a vision for why they needed this position and what they hoped this position would do. So make sure that you have an idea of what they were hoping to see. It can be a little hard trying to measure kind of success in a non-traditional role if you don't know what your expectations are. And I also think with a non-traditional role, it takes a lot of initiative to be planning your own projects and things that you want to work on. And when you're doing that, you need to make sure that you're letting others know what you're doing. This is a really big thing for a non-traditional role. You need to be advocating about what you do, your skills, your services, because a lot of time in a non-traditional role, there's got to be some buy-in because people don't know what you do. And so you're going to need to keep people abreast of what you're doing and how you can benefit them. And that goes into that last little bullet. Ask others how your skill set can benefit them. Maybe they have been trying to train new student workers. They get a lot of student workers, and they're looking for a more effective way to do so that can be referenced back. That would be an area where I could work with someone to get them some digital objects that can be passed down. I also want to second what Megan was saying about getting all the training that you can. Look for conferences, webinars, Twitter chats are a big thing now, books, publications, anything you can find that's going to give you some training. It's really important to keep in the know about what's coming up in these non-traditional roles, what the current conversations are. And I have found being in a non-traditional role that the networking is really important. So going to conferences that are a little more geared towards what you do. So you might find me an instructional design conference instead of a library conference because I need some of those other connections and skills that they can offer at something like that. And so I think just trying to really reach out and find the middle ground between your role as a non-traditional librarian, but also as a librarian is really important. So those would be my biggest tips. for navigating a non-traditional role. If you want to go ahead and hit the next slide. I just want to say thank you for attending and for hanging out with the technical difficulties. We're going to try and get that worked out for the next one. But if you have any questions, feel free to copy down my email, send me a tweet. I'd love to connect with you and keep the conversation going. So that is all from me. So I'm going to mute myself now.
All right, so we will switch over to the next presenter. Carol, do you want me to go through your slides, or do you want to try it yourself?
If you already have them up, why don't you just go ahead and show it? And
all right, yeah, I can certainly do that. I think the issue might have been with the browser. If those who were having problems were using something other than Chrome. Whoops. Let me get everything closed here.
All right, can everyone see my screen now?
Anybody having problems? Good?
Okay.
So far, so good. All right.
All right, well, my name is Caroline Smith, and I am the Inclusive Services Consultant at the South Carolina State Library. And you can go to the next slide. The South Carolina State Library is actually a state government agency that was established through state legislation. So we have a little bit of that history there on the slide. And we have a range of different focuses. We focus, my department in particular, focuses heavily on supporting public libraries around the state. But we also have a department that focuses on digitization. We have someone that works on the SC Lens shared catalog. We have a department that manages our Talking Book Services, which provides free reading materials to blind, visually impaired, and people with other disabilities that prevent them from reading a printed book. And then we have a department that focuses on working more with the public and providing some reference services and public programs. So there's a wide range to what we do here at the State Library. Another big role that we have is administering federal and state support for public libraries. So that would be in the form of state aid to county public library systems, excuse me, and as well as the LSTA grants that are a form of federal funding that we administer. You can go to the next slide. So my department is library development, and we provide consulting services mainly to public library staff, boards of trustees and directors, and friends of the library groups as well. But we also work somewhat with other types of libraries like school libraries, prison libraries, some academic libraries, and some other non-library organizations as well. And you can see our team members there, the director, we have a library development consultant who works mainly with boards, directors, and friends groups. Tiffany Hayes is our continuing education consultant. We have someone who specializes in youth services, and then myself, who I'm the inclusive services consultant. And that was a new position when I started in towards the end of 2017. So you can go to the next slide. So what are inclusive services? This was not a position that I had heard of before I saw the job listing in 2017, but the main focus comes down to the concept of inclusion, which you often hear about as part of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the definition here is from ALA's Office of Diversity and Outreach. Inclusion is an environment in which all individuals are treated fairly and respectfully, are valued for their distinctive skills, experiences, and perspectives, have equal access to resources and opportunities, and can contribute fully to the organization's success. So my overarching goal is to advocate and support more inclusive libraries in the state, and so that libraries really are for everyone. And getting a little more specific, 2 areas that were identified in the job description that they wanted me to focus on were people with disabilities around the state and Spanish speakers and other immigrants and refugees in the state, and how can we improve or create more accessible services for these groups. But since I was hired, I think that has been expanded somewhat to some other areas as well. And that inclusion covers the customers that we work with in our communities, as well as within the organization, and being inclusive of staff and employees. You can go to the next slide, Tiffany. So this was my long list of job duties, but rather than reading it all, it basically fell into 4 big categories: doing site visits, consultation, networking, and training. So I will talk a little about each one of those. You can go to the next slide. So site visits is one of my favorite parts of the job, and one of the most interesting, because I do physically get to drive out to lots of public libraries around the state. And you can see that I take lots of photos while I'm there. I will arrange a meeting with a library director or a staff member, usually around a specific issue, like this library wants to purchase some new assistive technology for patrons with disabilities, or they want to update their Spanish collection and get an opinion on that, or have some program they want to talk about. So I will go and meet with the staff, bring some resources or find out how I can support them, and then look around and see what that library is doing. You can go to the next slide. Then consultation is any time that I may give some advice or resources to a library staff member or director, and that could be a phone call or an email or just having a conversation with them. And then 2 other ways that I try to get that information to library staff are through the State Library's Diversity and Inclusion email discussion list. That's something anyone can join, and I send out training notices, articles, grant information, conference information related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we can have discussions on that list. The other thing that I do to provide information is maintain a equity, diversity, and inclusion in libraries LibGuide, which is on the State Library's website on our subject guides page. And I just continually add resources to this guide so that when I do get a question, I can point people to that information. You can go to the next slide. The networking is also extremely important to my position. I try to keep up with what is going on the national level in library associations and more specialized groups like Reforma, the National Association for Library Services to Latinos and the Spanish speaking, or ASCLA, which is specialized government and cooperative library agencies. I also try to form relationships with a lot of non-library community groups that are serving different populations. Some examples of those are on your screen there. ABLE South Carolina focuses on people with disabilities as an independent living center, so they've been a great source of information for me. PASOS is a statewide Latino health organization, and some of these partners are a good way for me to listen in on what the needs are with that community, and others have provided training for us or formed some kind of partnership. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services is a good example of that. They have partnered to host a webinar with us, and then they're providing a full day of training at the Johns Island Library soon about how to host your own citizenship programs at your library. You can go on to the next slide. Then training. As part of my job, based on all these conversations that I've had with librarians and directors and community groups, I try to identify what kind of training is really needed and going to improve our services and make libraries more inclusive. So we've had an Understanding Diversity training series, and some of these trainings I will bring out and offer regionally around the state so that it's a little easier to travel to. And then other trainings we will host centrally in Columbia. And the trainings are typically for public library staff, but they're open to others who may be interested, like library school students, academic staff, or other partner organizations, like in this case, early childcare providers. And in addition to finding outside speakers that can be experts in different areas and scheduling those, I can also lead training myself, especially if there's one library system that has a certain topic that they would like me to address for a staff day or a special training. We'll go to the next slide. So how I marketed myself for this position, you can see in that blue box on the right, sort of the path my career took. I had sort of a completely different focus in each position there. I started in circulation, then I worked as a computer instructor, teaching computer classes at a public library and helping with public computers. Then I worked as a reference librarian. Then I moved over to Children's Services as a department manager. And I also volunteered for a few years as an adult literacy tutor and did contract work related to instructional design, but around designing online classes related to digital literacy. So with that variety of jobs, I tried to form a big picture of what are the commonalities. And in each of those roles, I usually had a focus on inclusion and finding out who may be left out with our traditional services. So when I was a computer instructor, I was researching assistive technology and how can we make our classes how can we make computers easier to use for people with a variety of disabilities? We had many people who had arthritis and the mouse was physically difficult or vision difficulties. So I had some projects related to that. And later on, I worked in an area with a large Latino community. So I was able to draw in some of the projects, like working with partners to translate summer reading programs. And connect that to the job of inclusive services consultant. Developing your passions and interests. I did a lot of different things that were interesting to me at the time that may have seemed unrelated to each other at the time, but I was able to connect those to inclusion based on all those different populations that I'd be working with, and being an advocate in my own system for increased accessibility and increased services for Spanish speakers was something that I could mention as I was interviewing and applying for the job. I also found that networking and community relationships had been a big part of my previous positions and continue to be a huge part of what I do now as a consultant. Especially when I was working with the Latino community in previous positions. And so that was something I could mention. As a consultant and in a lot of library work, interpersonal skills are extremely important. And I also am in a support role now. So that was a change in terms of going from working at a public library system to being a trainer and a consultant here at the State Library. And like the other two presenters said, demonstrating growth and learning, since this is a non-traditional position and a new position, I've had to very much focus on continuing my own learning around equity, diversity, and inclusion, looking outside of libraries and seeing what other settings are doing in these areas, talking to other community groups in reading, watching webinars, attending trainings and conferences, all of those have helped me to expand my skill set once I was in this position. Tiffany, you can go to the next slide. And that is all I have for you today. So let me know if you have any questions, and thank you for attending.
All right. Thank you, presenters. What questions do we have from our attendees? You can type those in chat, and we will take a look. And presenters, any follow-up comments after wrapping everything up? Anything you would like to follow up and say? I think I can hear somebody typing, but I'm not sure. And we will be providing this recording as well as the PowerPoints. So if you're hoping to watch again and possibly contact the presenters with questions in the future, you're certainly welcome to do that. And if there's no other questions or comments from anybody, we can go ahead and wrap up for the day. Thank you for participating, and hope you will join us for the future webinars.